Chris, can you tell us about your time on Cobham?
Yes, I left the Royal Air Force in 1999 and I went to work for Cobham. At that time it was FR Aviation, but I'll refer to Cobham because that's what it became. Now, originally Cobham, or FR Aviation, had been tasked to provide some training services for the Royal Navy post the the Falklands War, when the Navy lost a number of surface vessels due to ship attacks by Argentinian Air Force. And they realised that there was a gap in their training and they needed some better training, especially in terms of electronic warfare and so on. So Cobham were engaged to provide this training. Now that contract started up and fairly quickly the Royal Air Force realised that Cobham had an ability here, or capability, that they could tap into. So the MOD contract, which the Navy had signed, was extended to provide support to the Royal Air Force. And the original contract had been set up at Bournemouth, and the extension of the contract was set up at Teesside Airport, Teesside International Airport, with 6 Falcons, and that was set up in the mid-90s. And I joined it about 4 years in 1999. And I was recruited in by a very good friend of mine, John Danning, who was the manager up at Teesside. And about 18 months later, he disappeared off down to Bournemouth to be the Director of Flight Operations for the company. And I took over managing the setup at Teesside. So the setup there, as I say, we had 6 Falcons. We had about 8 crews any one time. And those crews were predominantly, as far as the captains and the backseaters concerned, ex-military guys. All the backseaters were ex-military, mostly fast jet guys, ex-fast jet Phantoms, Buccaneers, things like that. And virtually all the captains, bar about 3, were ex-military as well, all fast jet guys. So we were providing operational training to the Royal Air Force. So the types of role that we were doing was jamming air defence radars all over UK. Jamming fighter radars like F2, F3 radars, so we would have the capability with our electronic pods on board the aircraft to jam their radars. We'd provide spoofing, decoys, we could tow targets, we could take part in their war games as embedded packages, so that when there was big exercises on board, we'd be brought along to take part, and not only would be extra assets for the other team to try and shoot down, but we could be jamming them at the same time and providing electronic jamming for the package that we were embedded in. So it was a very interesting operation. The Falcon was a great aircraft. It was developed, the wing was off a Dassault fighter. It's a French aircraft, but the Dassault wing was put onto the Falcon 20 because it had hard points on it.
Yes.
So those hard points could carry the electronic warfare pods. It had a number of limitations, one of which is that we didn't carry an awful lot of fuel, so that when the aircraft were acquired, they took all the extra kit out they didn't need, like the soundproofing, the toilets, all that sort of thing. So we had this business jet that was completely stripped down. We only normally had a couple of seats in the back, so there was a seat for the electronic warfare officer, and there might be 1 or 2 other seats in there, but all the sort of passenger seats were removed, and as I say, there was certainly no toilet.
For the champagne or anything.
No drinks drawer or anything. So the aircraft was customised. In that fit, we could carry a fair amount of fuel and the pods as well, but even so, we couldn't normally operate for more than, well, a maximum of about 3 hours.
That's probably a decent time though.
Yeah, but so, for instance, we'd go up to jam the Faroe Islands.
Oh.
In the Iceland-Faroes Gap. Okay, now that's quite a long transit to get up there. You don't actually have to fly all the way up to them. You can start jamming them from about 150 miles out, and then you set up a tow line and you go in and out. You don't have to get that close to them because the pods were quite powerful. But when, for instance, we were doing a mission like that, we'd take off from Teesside, we'd fly up into the Iceland-Faroes Gap, we'd sit there, we'd jam them for an hour or whatever, and then we'd have enough fuel to land at Lossiemouth or Kinloss, have lunch, refuel, go and do it again in the afternoon, and then fly back into Teesside. But we couldn't do the mission flying out of and back into Teesside because we wouldn't get much time on task doing that. So. But we provide that training for the Royal Air Force, so it was initially set up as a Royal Air Force contract. But of course we then finished up operating with NATO nations as well. So in any year our crews would do a number of detachments around NATO countries. So we go anywhere. We sometimes go outside NATO. I'm just thinking Finland's been in the news recently. We've sent aircraft up into Finland, but routinely we'd be in Norway, be in Holland, France, Germany, wherever we're required, we go and operate with our NATO allies and provide training, jamming them, taking part in their war games. So very, very exciting and interesting operation.
Absolutely. So how long did you spend at Cobham and in this role?
I was there for about 12 and a half years altogether. I was managing the operation for about 10 years. And then I'd always had my sights set on retiring by the time I was 60. Okay, that was it. I thought, no, 60 will do, and then I'll go off and do other things which I wanted to do. And in fact, I stayed on. I did my last 6 months part-time flying. I actually gave up my management responsibilities. I handed them over to a good friend of mine. He took over from me, and I just did the last 6 months as a part-time pilot, which was a great way to finish. I did 6 months, 50% of the time, and the rest of the time I was out doing what I wanted to do.
Not bad, is it? Not bad.
Yeah.